Okay, Alexander, we had yesterday the verdict on the Chauvin trial, the Derek Chauvin trial, George Floyd. Count 1, second-degree murder, guilty. Count 2, third-degree murder, guilty. Count 3, second-degree manslaughter, guilty. Guilty on all charges. Nancy Pelosi gave a speech and she looked up to the heavens and she thanked George Floyd for dying. That's not exaggerating there. She actually did that. We had Maxine Waters fly into Minnesota and pretty much threaten anyone that any of the jurors, I guess, that decide to not put in a guilty verdict, that they would be facing God knows what kind of punishment. We had all kind of jury tampering. I mean, it was just all kinds of madness. I don't understand the judge letting all this stuff off the hook, letting it fly. I mean, the jury wasn't even sequestered, so I mean, they had access to everything that was going on as well. Anyway, this whole thing was a complete S show. But we have the verdict, and we didn't have any peaceful protests.
No.
People know what I say, peaceful protests.
No.
I'm joking
No.
there, just so people understand it. And there you have it. There you have it. This is not going to come to an end. I think we're just at the beginning of mob rule. And I think this is what it is. We are now seeing mob rule, mob justice. We are at the beginning of a United States of America that is going to be ruled by the mob.
Let me make a few quick points about this. The first thing to say is, I do want to say, I don't think the defense team was terribly good, and I don't think they did a hugely good job of defending Chauvin. I mean, I say that's not, a comment about the case itself, but it is a comment about the defense team. The second point is this. Now, I'm not familiar with the law in Minnesota. All I will say is this. I've been checking again English law on murder. And English law on murder requires some intent either to kill or to cause grievous bodily harm. I don't see that, irrespective of what your views about Chauvin's motives were, that the evidence came anywhere close to that. So I would have thought, on the facts presented at that trial, it would have been extremely difficult, to the point of being all but inconceivable, that Chauvin would have been convicted of murder on the same facts in England. Now, people will obviously say Minnesota law is different. This is the state of Minnesota. I understand that, but I still think that's a point to make. I would also say that, again, in England, I think it is difficult to understand how a jury or a court would find somebody guilty of murder and manslaughter of the same killing at the same time. I'm not saying it's impossible. I just, again, find it very difficult to understand all of that. Those are the points I'm going to make about the case itself. There's going to be appeals. I don't think the appeals are by any means a foregone conclusion. I don't think anybody should assume any particular outcome to those appeals. And the reason that I don't is because of these extraordinary comments that were made on the eve of the jury decision by people like Maxine Waters and by the President of the United States. The judge has already conceded that there is a possibility that, on the strength of what Maxine Waters said, there might be a mistrial, and that might give grounds to appeal. The judge was very careful to say that that didn't appear to be the case to the judge, but of course an appeal court would be fully able to come to a different view. And I have to say that to expect a different outcome in this case at trial was perhaps to expect the impossible, given the very fraught atmosphere in the United States itself. Now, I'm choosing my words extremely carefully, as I'm sure both our viewers and you yourself realise, but I would repeat again what I said. I find it very difficult to believe that an English court would have come to the same decision. I find it very difficult to understand the murder and manslaughter convictions on the same basis. I think the comments that were made before the jury gave its verdict were, to put it mildly, concerning, and may give legitimate grounds to argue for a mistrial. And I'm going to make one final point, which is that on the facts, there's, it seems to me, real problems with some of the medical evidence, in that the one doctor who actually carried out an autopsy seems to think that Chauvin died for causes different from the ones that the prosecution alleged. Now, I'm going to be, as I said, very careful, because I don't want to inflame the situation, obviously, but also, I mean, we've got to be concerned about what some people who are watching this program may do. But I think I've made my views about this case very clear indeed.
Yeah, so I wonder how the world is viewing all of this, because you had the President of the United States saying that he's praying for the guilty verdicts. Pretty much, he did say, "I'm praying for the guilty verdicts," but everyone understood exactly what he was implying. The President of the United States was weighing in and saying he's pretty much praying for guilty verdicts. You had Maxine Waters. I mean, she's not just a member of Congress. I mean, she's the chair of the, I believe, the Financial Committee in the House. I mean, she's pretty much as high up there in the Democratic Party hierarchy, as you can get, you know, landing in Minnesota and essentially threatening anyone in the anyone of the jurors who even would think about questioning the guilt of Chauvin, that if they did, then they would face consequences. And you had all kinds of other things going on. I mean, the whole world is probably watching this and wondering, you know, the U.S. is completely lost at this point. That's my impression. I mean, completely lost. And I don't want to focus on the trial. I'm talking from a standpoint of, supposedly you have the greatest democracy in all the world. Supposedly you have, you know, Lady Justice blindfolded, but you have the president, you have senators, you have obviously the mainstream media, obviously big tech, all of them just getting involved in this trial to make absolutely certain that the verdict is delivered the way they want it to be delivered. And sure enough, that's what they got. I mean, it's obvious that the President of the United States weighed in on this. I mean, you can't get more worse than that.
No, you can't. And can I just say, I mean, that is an extraordinary breach of convention. I mean, it is a fundamental principle, or at least practice in democracies, that over the course of a trial, especially a trial like this, political leaders, especially those who hold elected office, who are actually in charge of the government of the country, do not comment on the trial before the verdict is delivered, for obvious reasons. When it happens in other countries, the United States and its allies in the West all rightly criticize it. So in this case, they did exactly that which they criticize in other countries, and which should not happen. I mean, it's an absolutely astonishing thing to do. And as I said, if the United States had a functioning justice system, there could be grounds for appeal. And the judge conceded as much. By the way, I should say that, you know, that I have some issues with the judge, because the judge seemed to think that one of the charges should have been dropped, but then did absolutely nothing to make sure that it was dropped, which again seems strange to me, and may also, in a functioning system, give grounds to appeal. Well, anyway, the judge did that, and the politicians weighed in and said the things that they did. And I have to say, in Maxine Waters' case, she went far beyond what is remotely appropriate. I mean, there is no question at all that what she said, in my opinion, is intimidating. And given that a president of the United States was impeached only fairly recently on the strength of certain things that he said, which, by the way, was certainly First Amendment protected, well, it seems to me that these words that we've just heard go far beyond that. And it's startling that there have been no consequences and that the entire Democratic Party in Congress united behind her. So, I mean, that was a most improper and completely wrong thing to do. Now, what does the rest of the world think? Well, the rest of the world divides into three parts. There's the allies of the United States, the places like Britain, wherever, where the media reliably echoes what the media in the United States is saying. Then there are those countries like China, which are manipulating and using this thing very opportunistically because they want to brand the United States very much as being the kind of place that some people in the United States say that it is. In other words, a country where there is rampant discrimination and rampant action against people of colour and all that sort of thing. So the Chinese will run with this, and they've been given another issue that they can play with. And then there is the rest of the world, which is the majority, which is looking on astonished. And they're saying to themselves that the United States is taking leave of its senses. And what exactly is going on there? And is this the country we all thought it was and which we admired precisely because it knows how to separate the legal justice system from the political system, and where decisions in courts are made in courts and not outside them? But I mean, that's what I suspect most of humanity, at least that part of humanity that is following this trial, is thinking. And when I say humanity, I mean all of humanity everywhere, in Africa, in Latin America, wherever you wish.
Yeah, okay. Well, since Russiagate, there was no justice in Russiagate.
No.
You had January 6th, which, is just ridiculous that they're arresting people who were involved in what happened in January 6th. Obviously, you had the November 3rd election and everything that went down there. You have the big tech censoring. And you have what's going on here. And it's crystal clear that this really is ruled by the neoliberal woke mob. And that's the United States going forward. At least if I'm reading it right, there's going to be a certain set of laws and standards for one part of the population and a certain set of laws and standards. Actually, better put no laws and no standards for another part of the population. Yeah. And that is the way we're heading when you're looking at the U.S. at this moment in time. I think there's no doubt about that. And you just take a look at Trump and Maxine Waters, and there you have, you can't get a better example than that. What Trump said, which was, very light, go there for a peaceful protest. Then you had what Maxine Waters did when she was in Minneapolis. And by the way, she has a history of doing this as well. This is not the first time that she has incited violence and made threats against citizens. I mean, she's punching down. She's a powerful person in the U.S. and she's punching down. She's threatening citizens of the U.S. But no problem. So the U.S. is definitely a two-tier society at this point. That's crystal clear.
Well, absolutely. Can I just say a few things? First of all, a country that is not capable of the impartial conduct of the law, where decisions are not made in court, where the rule of law doesn't function, where decisions are actually made outside the law, outside the courts, is not any longer a functioning democracy in the way that it was. And the second thing I wanted to say is that, of course, we've come full circle, because if you go back to the civil rights movement of the 1960s, its entire purpose, its whole function, its objective was to achieve equality of everybody before the law. White people, black people, people of color, every conceivable American, that they would all share equally the same rights given to them by the law and by the Constitution. And now what we're seeing is that that whole process is being turned on its head by the very same people who claim to be the heirs and successors of that civil rights movement. It is a most extraordinary state of affairs. The United States is reverting to a system of dual law, which you discussed, and which did exist in parts of the United States previously, but it is doing so on the basis of a claim arising from a civil rights movement which had sought very hard to do away with all of that. I think there are people in the United States in the 1960s who, if they were to come back now and saw what was happening, would feel deeply betrayed and very troubled.
Yeah. I don't even care that much about the.
No, I have to say.
The trial of the verdict. I mean, to me, okay. What I care about watching this whole thing go down is the absolute interference of these very powerful, Democrat officials. That's what we saw in the mainstream media. Okay, that's a given. But Pelosi and Waters and Biden getting involved in this thing, and of course, nothing's going to happen to them. And once again, I'll go back to Maxine Waters. Nothing's going to happen to her. This is the beginning of, once again, a Politburo style of government. That's what the U.S. is morphing into, is some sort of one party rule government where you have this level of oligarchs fused with political elites. Oligarchs fused with political elites being protected by the mainstream media and those foot soldiers that are spewing out the fake news on a daily basis. This is what you're getting in the U.S. and that's crystal clear. Nancy Pelosi, untouchable. Maxine Waters, untouchable. James Comey, untouchable. McCabe, untouchable. Brennan, untouchable. Hillary Clinton, untouchable. I mean, these people can do absolutely anything they want. And when I mean anything, I really mean absolutely anything.
Indeed, and by contrast, someone like Michael Flynn, National Security Advisor to the President of the United States, but the wrong president, according to some people, who broke no law, as is now accepted, in terms of anything that he did. He was put through the most gruesome ordeal, which went on and on and on and on and on in a court. And again, when the justice system is used in that incredibly selective way, then of course it is not a justice system at all. And I entirely agree with you. It is the interference of politicians that is the main problem. On this particular case that we've just seen, the Chauvin case, well, as I said, normally, all sorts of things happen over the course of cases. I repeat, I didn't think the defense conducted the case very well. I think that the courts could normally be left alone to deal with this thing by themselves. Sometimes things go wrong in first instance trials and then are corrected in appeals. That's why the appeal court system exists. But what is deeply concerning, what is incredibly alarming, is that politicians now feel that they can weigh in on these matters and say these kind of things, despite the effect that they unquestionably have on the legal justice system. And we saw, perhaps more strikingly, in the Flynn case, what are the consequences of that?
Yeah. Okay. I don't think this verdict surprised anybody. I mean, I think you would have to be absolutely crazy if you were a juror to go any other way, given everything that you were exposed to, because once again, they weren't sequestered. So they could see everything that was being said about the trial. So you would have to be absolutely bananas to question the...
Well, of course,
the narrative.
Well, well, of course, I mean, no one can be surprised at all. And I mean, that would have been astonishing if there'd been a different outcome in all the circumstances. But there we are. That's the situation in the United States at the moment. We will see where this goes. As I said, there will be an appeal process. This isn't ended yet, but the actual big story about it is the fact that, as I said, the politicians interfered so openly in the way in which the case, in the conduct of the case, whilst it was underway. And I'm going to say this straight away. I mean, I found the Maxine Waters intervention absolutely shocking, but I was even more shocked in some ways by the intervention by the President of the United States. And by the way, I saw Nancy Pelosi's comments after the verdict, and I thought that they were extremely strange, and they did make me wonder, frankly, what Nancy Pelosi was thinking. I mean, it was most bizarre. As I said, thanking the victim for his death seems the most odd way of thinking to me. But I mean, I've long thought that, you know, Nancy needs to retire, and needs to do it soon, because, to be completely honest, I thought it was one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. And I would have thought, actually, there are people who, you know, care for George Floyd's family, might have had certain feelings about those comments, which, well, I'm not going to probe into, but they did seem to me extraordinarily bizarre.
Yeah. All right. We'll leave it there. I guess we'll leave it there. I don't have anything else to say about it.
No, I don't have anything else. I think we said all we can, actually.
Yeah. Okay. I'll drop a coupon code 10% to the Duran shop down below. Take care.